Before we dive into today's story, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if this story moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Now, let's begin. The Crystal Bay Grand Hall glowed under layers of golden chandeliers, each light reflecting off polished marble floors and tall glass windows that overlooked the waterfront. Nearly 200 guests filled the elegant ballroom, dressed in tailored suits, silk gowns, and expensive jewelry, all gathered to celebrate the 30-year wedding anniversary of Richard and Evelyn Monroe. Servers moved smoothly between tables with trays of champagne. Soft jazz played in the background, and a massive banner reading 30 Years of Love and Legacy hung above the dance floor. At the Monroe family table, Alyssa Monroe sat quietly in a simple navy blue dress she had bought on sale, holding a glass of sparkling water instead of champagne. She kept her shoulders relaxed and her expression neutral, even though she could already feel the familiar weight of judgment in the air. Across from her sat her older sister, Vanessa Monroe, glowing in a designer red gown, her diamond earrings catching the light every time she turned her head. Vanessa's husband, Dr. Marcus Hale, leaned back confidently in his chair, laughing loudly and telling stories to anyone who would listen. At the center of the table, Evelyn Monroe looked every bit the proud society woman, elegant and composed, while Richard Monroe accepted handshakes and praise, smiling as guests congratulated him not only on his marriage, but also on his success as the founder of Monroe Industrial Systems. For Alyssa, this night already felt less like a celebration and more like another performance where she was expected to play her usual role, the underachieving younger daughter. As more relatives and business associates gathered around the family table, the familiar comparisons began without anyone even trying to hide them. "Vanessa just closed another major case," Aunt Lorraine announced loudly, smiling as she patted Vanessa's arm. "Top corporate litigation firm in the state. Can you imagine?" Vanessa smiled modestly, but her eyes shined with pride. "It was a big one," she said. "High-profile client, tough negotiations, but we won." Dr. Marcus raised his glass. "That's my wife," he said proudly. "Always winning." Richard chuckled and nodded. "That's the Monroe drive," he said. "We don't settle for average." Alyssa kept her eyes on her glass, already knowing what was coming next. Sure enough, Cousin Trevor leaned forward and asked, with a tone that sounded polite but felt sharp, "So, Alyssa, what are you doing these days?" "Still bouncing around between jobs." Alyssa forced a small smile. "I'm working," she said calmly. "Staying busy." Aunt Lorraine tilted her head. "Busy where exactly? Last I heard you were at some consulting firm. Or was it marketing?" Vanessa jumped in smoothly. "She's tried a few things. Hard to keep track, honestly." The table laughed softly, and Alyssa felt that familiar sting. The laughter that wasn't cruel enough to call out, but wasn't kind enough to ignore either. Richard cleared his throat, pretending to be supportive while still reinforcing the narrative everyone had agreed on. "Alyssa just hasn't found her true path yet," he said. "Some people take longer." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "She's 32, Dad. Most people figure things out by now." Dr. Marcus smirked. "Or at least stick with something long enough to build a real career." Alyssa kept her voice steady. "I've been with the same company for several years." That caught Evelyn's attention. "Several years," she repeated, surprised. "Why didn't you tell us that?" Alyssa shrugged lightly. "You never really asked." Vanessa leaned forward. "Same company, same position?" Alyssa nodded. "Same company. The role has grown, but the title stayed the same." Marcus laughed. "So no promotions, no real progress." Alyssa met his eyes calmly. "Progress doesn't always look like a new title." Uncle Raymond, who had been listening quietly, frowned. "What's the company called?" Alyssa hesitated for just a moment before answering. It's called Horizon Crest Group. Vanessa immediately pulled out her phone. Never heard of it, she said. Is it another startup? Alyssa smiled faintly. It started small. It's not small anymore. Vanessa's fingers flew across her phone screen as she searched. Her confident smile slowly faded, replaced by confusion. Then shock. This can't be right, she whispered. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. What? He took the phone from her, and his face changed just as quickly. Horizon Crest Group, he read aloud slowly. Global Industrial Holdings. Operations in 10 countries. Annual revenue over $2.4 billion. The table went silent. Even the background music seemed louder in the sudden quiet. Evelyn's hand went to her chest. Alyssa, what is this? Alyssa spoke evenly. That's my company. Richard stared at her as if she had spoken another language. Your company? Alyssa nodded. I founded it 5 years ago. Uncle Raymond leaned back in his chair, stunned. You're telling us you run a multi-billion-dollar company? Alyssa corrected gently. I run a company that became multi-billion-dollar. There's a difference. Vanessa shook her head slowly. All this time, we thought you were struggling. Alyssa looked around the table. You assumed I was struggling. I was building. The words landed heavily, changing the energy of the entire table. Richard's hands trembled slightly as he asked, So every time you said you were traveling for work, every time you changed locations, Alyssa nodded. I was overseeing acquisitions, living on site, learning how each operation worked. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. You did all this alone. Alyssa's voice softened. Not alone. I had a small team at first. But yes, I carried most of it myself in the beginning. Vanessa looked down, her voice quieter now. We made jokes about you, about job hopping. Alyssa met her gaze. I wasn't job hopping. I was building a portfolio. Marcus exhaled slowly. This is unreal. Uncle Raymond shook his head in disbelief. From a trust fund to a global empire. Alyssa nodded. $2 million. Turned into something much bigger through risk, long nights, and a lot of learning. Richard swallowed hard. And we treated you like a failure. Alyssa didn't raise her voice. You treated the version of me you created in your minds. The truth sat heavy between them, changing the meaning of every past family dinner, every joke, every sideways glance. The celebration continued around them, but for the Monroe family table, everything had already shifted. The air around the Monroe family table felt heavier than the crystal chandeliers above them. Conversations at nearby tables continued, laughter and clinking glasses filling the room. But at their table, time seemed to slow. Richard leaned forward, his voice low and unsteady. So when we joked about setting you up with something more stable, when we offered to help you financially, Alyssa nodded slowly. I accepted the gift cards. I donated them to employee hardship funds. Marcus let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You donated our pity money. Alyssa didn't smile. It felt more useful that way. Evelyn pressed a napkin to her lips. All those years, I thought you were lost. Alyssa shook her head gently. I was focused. Vanessa crossed her arms, struggling between pride and resentment. You let us think you were failing. Alyssa met her eyes. I let you think what you wanted to think. I never lied. I just didn't fight your story. Uncle Raymond spoke quietly. Most people would have corrected the record. Alyssa replied softly, Most people want validation. I wanted freedom. The honesty in her voice made it impossible to argue. Richard leaned back in his chair, staring at his hands. Your mother and I spent years worrying about you, he said, talking about how to fix your life. Alyssa's tone was calm, not bitter. My life didn't need fixing. Your perception did. Evelyn reached across the table and touched Alyssa's hand. We measured success by what we understood: titles, promotions, traditional paths. Alyssa squeezed her hand lightly. And I chose a different path. Vanessa's voice cracked slightly. I used you as a comparison, to make myself feel ahead. Alyssa didn't deny it. I know. That admission hurt more than anger would have. Marcus shook his head slowly. I've operated on patients worth less than your company makes in an hour. Alyssa gave a small smile. Numbers are strange that way. Uncle Raymond chuckled softly. You don't even sound impressed by it. Alyssa shrugged. The money is a tool. The work is the point. That statement silenced them again, forcing each of them to question how they defined success. Richard cleared his throat. When Horizon Crest acquired Monroe Industrial's competitor last year, that was you. Alyssa nodded. Yes, we stabilized them and saved 300 jobs. Evelyn whispered, You're saving companies. Alyssa corrected gently. We're rebuilding them. Vanessa looked up sharply. And Dad's company? Alyssa met Richard's eyes. If Horizon Crest ever acquires Monroe Industrial, I won't strip it. I'll modernize it. Richard's eyes filled with emotion. You'd save my life's work. Alyssa said, quietly, I'd make it stronger. That broke something in him. For the first time that night, Richard didn't look like a proud founder or a successful businessman. He looked like a father. I misjudged you, he said. Completely. Alyssa nodded. Yes, you did. The truth didn't need softening. Evelyn wiped her eyes. Can we start over? Alyssa hesitated. Maybe. But starting over means changing how you see people, not just me. Vanessa swallowed hard. I can try. Alyssa answered honestly. Trying is a start. As the band announced a slow dance for Richard and Evelyn, the couple stood, holding hands. 30 years, Evelyn whispered to her husband. And tonight we learned our daughter built something bigger than anything we imagined. Richard shook his head in disbelief. Not bigger, Alyssa said softly. Different. Richard looked at her with new eyes. No, Alyssa. Bigger in impact. As they walked to the dance floor, Vanessa lingered beside her sister. I was cruel, she said quietly. I don't know how to undo that. Alyssa replied, You don't undo it with words. You undo it with change. Marcus nodded. That's fair. Vanessa looked at Alyssa carefully. I don't want to compete with you anymore. Alyssa studied her face. Then don't. Be proud of what you built. I'm proud of what I built. Both can exist. Vanessa gave a small, emotional laugh. I don't even know who you really are anymore. Alyssa smiled sadly. Neither do I sometimes. I've been too busy building. The music swelled, and for a moment, the family simply watched Richard and Evelyn dance. Two people who had built a life together without knowing the empire growing quietly in their daughter's shadow. Later that night, as guests said their goodbyes and the ballroom slowly emptied, Alyssa stood near the exit, watching her parents laugh softly together, exhausted but happy. Her phone buzzed with missed calls, emails, and media alerts, but she silenced it. For once, she wanted a moment that wasn't about valuations, acquisitions, or headlines. Vanessa approached her one last time. I'm proud of you, she said, without comparison, without jealousy. Alyssa believed her. Thank you, she replied. Richard and Evelyn hugged Alyssa tightly before leaving. No matter what you've built, Evelyn whispered, you're still our daughter. Alyssa nodded. And no matter what I've built, I still want a family that sees me, not a story about me. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, Alyssa felt something she hadn't expected. Not victory, not revenge, not even satisfaction, but clarity. She didn't need their approval to build her empire. But maybe with time they could build something new too. A relationship based not on assumptions, but on truth. And for Alyssa Monroe, that might be the hardest and most important work of all. The following morning, Alyssa Monroe sat alone in her penthouse apartment, the city skyline stretching beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, untouched breakfast growing cold on the kitchen counter. The silence felt louder than the ballroom ever had. Her phone continued to vibrate with messages from her executive team, her PR director, and board members reacting to whispers already circulating about her identity and family connection to Richard Monroe. She leaned back against the counter and exhaled slowly, replaying the night in her mind. The shock on her father's face, the way her mother's hands trembled, the mixture of awe and regret in Vanessa's eyes. For years, Alyssa had compartmentalized her worlds, the family that underestimated her and the empire she built quietly. Now those worlds had collided. "You can't unring a bell," she muttered to herself. Her assistant texted, "Media requests are escalating. Do you want to issue a statement?" Alyssa typed back, "Not yet. Let them speculate." For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about leverage or strategy. She was thinking about identity. Not CEO, not founder, not billionaire. Just Alyssa, the daughter who had been misunderstood, and the woman who had stopped trying to correct it. Later that afternoon, Richard Monroe sat in his home office, staring at old framed photos on his wall. Pictures of Vanessa in her graduation cap, pictures of Alyssa in casual clothes with messy hair, pictures of family vacations where Alyssa had always stood slightly apart. He finally understood something that had taken him 5 years too long to see. "I didn't lose a daughter," he said quietly to Evelyn. "I just never bothered to truly see her." Evelyn nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "We saw what we expected to see," she replied, "not what was actually there." Richard rubbed his temples. "She built something extraordinary while we were busy criticizing her." Evelyn whispered, "We taught her that our love came with conditions, success the way we defined it." The realization hit harder than any business failure ever had. Richard had spent his life building machines, factories, and contracts, but he had neglected the emotional machinery of his own family. "I don't know how to fix this," he admitted. Evelyn reached for his hand. "We start by listening," she said. "Not advising, not comparing, just listening." For the first time in years, Richard Monroe felt truly small, not in status, but in understanding. Vanessa, meanwhile, sat in her luxury office overlooking the city, staring at her reflection in the glass. She had always defined herself by winning. Winning cases, winning praise, winning comparisons. Alyssa had been her silent measuring stick, the person she told herself she had outpaced. Now that illusion was shattered. "I built my identity on being better than my sister," she whispered. The thought made her stomach twist. She called Marcus. "I don't know who I am without the competition," she admitted. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Then maybe you finally get to figure out who you are for real," he said. Vanessa closed her eyes. For the first time, she felt something close to humility. Not the performative kind, but the kind that stripped away ego. She didn't resent Alyssa's success as much as she resented the mirror it held up to her own insecurities. "I want to be proud of her," Vanessa said softly. "Not because it makes our family look good, but because she earned it." Marcus replied, "That's the first honest thing you've said about this." Vanessa knew that repairing her relationship with Alyssa would take more than apologies. It would take a new way of seeing her sister, not as a rival, but as her own person. Weeks later, Alyssa sat in a conference room at Horizon Crest headquarters, leading a meeting about a struggling manufacturing plant in Ohio. As executives debated costs and projections, Alyssa interrupted gently. "What happens to the workers if we don't step in?" The room went quiet. A senior VP answered, "Most likely closure within 18 months." Alyssa nodded. "Then we step in." After the meeting, her CFO pulled her aside. "You could make more money focusing only on high-margin acquisitions," he said. Alyssa replied, "Money isn't the only metric." That philosophy had built Horizon Crest, and it had also built Alyssa's sense of self. She sent a short message to her parents. "If you want to visit headquarters sometime, you're welcome. No tours, just real conversations." The reply came an hour later. "We'd like that. We're ready to listen." Alyssa stared at the message for a long time before responding. Then comes parents, not judges. The simple exchange felt heavier than any billion-dollar deal. On a quiet Sunday evening, Alyssa stood alone on her balcony, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. She thought about the factories she had saved, the workers whose lives had stabilized, and the family dynamics that were only beginning to shift. She knew her parents might never fully understand her world, and her sister might never fully escape comparison. But something had changed. The story they told about her had been broken open. No longer the struggling daughter. No longer just the billionaire CEO. Something more human, more complicated, more real. Alyssa rested her hands on the railing and allowed herself a small, private smile. She had built an empire without their approval. Now, maybe she could build something harder, a family relationship based on truth instead of assumption. Whether they succeeded or failed at that didn't define her anymore. She had already proven who she was. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to explain it to anyone. Several months later, the Monroe family gathered again, this time not in a ballroom, but in a quiet conference room at Horizon Crest's headquarters. There were no chandeliers, no champagne, no performances, just glass walls, whiteboards filled with strategy notes, and the low hum of real work happening outside. Richard sat stiffly in his chair, looking around with a mixture of pride and discomfort. "This is your world," he said softly. Alyssa nodded. "This is where I live most of my life." Evelyn studied the employees walking past, young engineers, plant managers, analysts, and operations staff. "They look normal," she said, almost surprised. Alyssa smiled faintly. "They are. Just people doing their jobs. Just like me." Vanessa sat quietly, listening more than talking for once. "I always imagined CEOs in corner offices, separated from everyone else," she admitted. Alyssa gestured to the open floor. "I don't believe in distance. You can't lead people you don't understand." Richard swallowed. "You built this without us," he said. Alyssa answered honestly. "I had to. I needed space to become who I was without being constantly compared or corrected." The room fell into a thoughtful silence, one filled not with accusation, but with understanding that had taken years too long to arrive. Over lunch in the company cafeteria, something shifted in a small but meaningful way. Instead of asking Alyssa for business advice or bragging about her success to others, her parents asked about her life. "Do you get lonely?" Evelyn asked quietly. Alyssa considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Leadership can be isolating." Richard nodded slowly. "I felt that too, building my company. I just never admitted it." Vanessa looked at Alyssa with softer eyes. "I thought confidence meant you never doubted yourself," she said. Alyssa shook her head. "Confidence just means you keep going even when you doubt yourself." That honesty surprised them all. For the first time, Alyssa wasn't a symbol, not a failure, not a success story, not a headline. She was just a woman talking to her family about pressure, fear, ambition, and purpose. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flashy, but it was real. And for Alyssa, it felt more meaningful than any public recognition she had ever received. That evening, as Alyssa watched her parents and sister walk out of the building together, she realized something quietly powerful. She didn't need them to fully understand her to move forward. What she needed was honesty from herself and from them. The old story was gone. The struggling daughter, the perfect sister, the proud father, the flawless family image. All of it had cracked. What remained was imperfect, awkward, and uncertain, but also real. Alyssa turned back toward her office, where new deals waited, new factories needed saving, and new workers depended on her leadership. She had built an empire from vision and persistence. Now she would build her family relationships the same way, slowly, deliberately, without pretending. Whether they succeeded or failed no longer defined her worth. She had already proven who she was, not to the world, not to the media, not to her family, but to herself. And for Alyssa Monroe, that was the only ending that truly mattered. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.